Yes, indeed. Okay, good morning, everyone. Thanks very much for attending the session this morning called Community Wealth Building Meets Community-Led Tourism. This session is part of a series of week-long conversations that we've organised to celebrate community-led tourism. And I'll say a wee bit about why we're interested in community-led tourism in a minute. Once we hear from our fabulous speakers, no pressure guys, we'll have plenty of time for questions, comments, observations at the end of the session. My name's Pauline Gordon, I'm the director at SENScot, and I'll be chairing the session today. I think Sarah has already put up the usual Zoom etiquette rules, so I'm sure we're all familiar with them now anyway. So why are we interested in community-led tourism? In October 2020, in partnership with Creetown Initiative, who do a lot of work in this area, SENScot embarked on what we called a proof of concept project around community tourism initiatives, and we worked in two pilot areas. We worked in the towns of Girvan and Brecon, and both of those pilot projects have made a significant amount of progress since 2020. They've been inspiring, they've been a genuine partnership approach, and we have learned a lot of lessons from that work. My colleague Sarah Cameron, who leads on the community-led tourism work's also here today, so if you've got any specific questions around the pilot areas, you can direct them to her. Anyway, we're interested in community-led tourism. Suffice to say, tourism touches the everyday lives of Scottish people. It impacts communities economically, socially and environmentally. And it's clear that throughout the pandemic, there's been an acceleration and a move towards a different model of tourism. A marked interest in demand for staycations, green responsible tourism, family vacation offerings. And we believe that community-led tourism delivers on many aspects of that new model, fosters a real sense of connection between visitor and place, and the feeling of being a welcome part of a community. So across Scotland, and in particular in rural and island communities, there are a whole host of community-led tourism examples that are being driven forward by local people, local businesses and community enterprises. So for example, craft and food trails, local festivals and events, heritage centres, adventure tourism and some novel family experiences are all pretty much under the radar actually in Scotland. These initiatives we would call community-led tourism. They're designed by the local community for the local community on the basis that they deliver benefits for that community of place, but they also provide authentic and attractive offerings for tourists. Equally, tourism and local regeneration, we would argue, goes hand in hand. And that has some really important touch points to the principles around community wealth building. It keeps wealth within communities for the benefit of the people who live there. So local improvements, be it a high street facelift, a community-owned swimming pool, disability-friendly accessible pathways, heritage projects, mini festivals, all of these things benefit local people, whilst at the same time making it a more attractive place for visitors. It's local improvements like these, we would argue, that underpin a move towards responsible tourism, enabling tourists to make a greater and meaningful connection between the visitor and the place, and fosters a greater sense of pride for people that live there. Before I hand to our fabulous speakers, just to bring some of this to life, I'm going to ask Sarah to show a very short video, and I hope that works.
Change is coming. No, change is already here. You can see it in our politics. our economy, technology, and the climate. Change. The secret is to view it as an opportunity, not a problem. An opportunity to think about what we do and how we can do it better. Tourism needs to change. We need to think about the impact we have on the environment. We need to think about the impact we have on infrastructure, communities, businesses, people. In Scotland, we're good at thinking. Our thinking, point of fact, has changed the world more than once. So let's think seriously about tourism in Scotland and for Scotland. Let's think about shifting from attracting volume to delivering greater value for our nation and for our local communities. Let's think about the people who live and work in our country, who work in your businesses. Today is when that thinking turns to action, when change happens, a new era, a new approach. One that's brave, outward-looking, forward-thinking, responsive, collaborative, and with people at its heart. An approach that will enrich the lives of those who live here and those who visit. That will preserve our places for future generations by delivering responsible tourism. For we want everyone in Scotland to experience the benefits of tourism now and for many years to come. That's not just what we think we need to do, it's what we must do, together. And by working together, Scotland will succeed. By putting our communities, our people, our visitors, our businesses and our environment at the heart of everything we do, we will make the most of change and make Scotland the world leader in 21st century tourism.
Thanks, Sarah. I love that video. I think it does bring the whole notion of community-led tourism to life. So I thought that would be a nice introduction before I hand over to our fabulous speakers, I've called them. Mark Greaves and Tom Henderson from South Ayrshire Council, who are the community wealth building team. And I'm sure they'll make some of those connections that I mentioned and the links to community-led tourism and the importance in relation to the context of community wealth building. So without further ado, I shall pass over to our speakers.
Okay, thanks, Pauline. Yeah, I would agree that that video was fantastic. Gosh. And hopefully, well, I think a few of the same messages will be coming through the presentation that that we're going to give. And just say I'll primarily give the presentation, and then I think Tom will jump in and help on any questions. Let's see if I can share the screen. Is that coming? Is that visible now?
Perfect.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, thanks for the opportunity to speak today. Just as by way of quick introduction, my name is Mark Greaves. I'm the local places coordinator at South Ayrshire Council. My role bridges community wealth building and strategic placemaking with a particular focus on towns and town centres. My colleague Tom, who's with me today, is a community wealth building officer with a particular focus on working with communities and community groups and supporting their aspirations in regard to releasing disused, unproductive or underproductive assets for community benefits or social enterprise. We're both from the local places team in the economy and regeneration service at the council. And this presentation is about community wealth building. How we're doing it might be slightly different from the way some other community wealth building teams at other local authorities are doing it, with a particular relevance to Girvan, where we're working with the community-led tourism group. I'm not sure, I think, Pauline, you kind of covered a bit of what community wealth building is, and I kind of trust everybody is familiar with it, but just as a recap, it is essentially about creating resilient and inclusive economies for the benefit of local areas through the maximization of local assets. So it's kind of runs counter to the traditional model of economic development, which is focused on inward investment I think I heard Neil McEnroy call it pre-distributing wealth as opposed to redistributing wealth, which seems pretty good, actually. But essentially, it is a people-centered approach, and we're trying to make it authentic to South Ayrshire, focusing on on leveraging local benefits from our local existing assets. We do have a small team of community wealth building officers. Tom is one of 3. Like I say, we sit within the local places team, which again, we have this strategic remit for placemaking and community wealth building, and we do see the two as intertwined. Just again, a little, I suppose, framework. Community wealth building forms a central theme of the Scottish Government's Programme for Government and National Performance Framework as part of the national mission to create new jobs, good jobs, and green jobs. It's reflected in an increasing number of documents that are produced by the government, such as draft NPF 4. And you say, I imagine it will be embedded in a number of documents coming forward. It's not going away. South Ayrshire Council signed a charter committing the council to embedding the principles and ethos across relevant council services. And to deliver on these commitments, there's also to develop community wealth building projects. There's on a pan-Ayrshire basis, there's now a community wealth building commission, which comprises the 3 Ayrshire councils and other anchor institutions such as NHS, Ayrshire and Arran, Ayrshire College and Scottish Enterprise. And I'll also mention it's being delivered within the framework of the Ayrshire Growth Deal, and with that comes a community wealth building fund to support projects, actions, and initiatives within the area. Within South Ayrshire, we have an economic development strategy, which community wealth building is a consistent strand through that. We have a particular focus on the Great Places pillar of the 3 pillars: Great Places, strong businesses, and good growth, with a vision to achieving South Ayrshire as a place where businesses thrive and people enjoy an outstanding quality of life. It's there in the strategy, linking placemaking and community wealth building. One of the key initiatives that we're delivering within community wealth building now is the Scotland Loves Local gift card. If you're not familiar with it, it's a national initiative aimed at keeping spend local for longer in communities. It encourages all those who live in Scotland to think local first and support their high streets, supporting the businesses around them, protecting local jobs, and making their communities stronger. I think we've got 104 businesses signed up to this initiative now, which is, I think, quite a good achievement considering we started back in the autumn of last year. So, and we've got a good range of shops and businesses signed up. So covering food and drink, hospitality, clothes, you name it. We're trying to make it so that folks can meet their daily needs through the spend on the gift card. Like I say, we're taking a strategic approach to community wealth building at South Ayrshire. So we're linking it with placemaking. So and with a particular focus on our town centres. This ethos or approach is underpinned by concepts such as the 20-minute neighbourhoods, making them more resilient and better able to meet challenges associated with climate change. And also just engaging with communities, I think is a constant thread, because Tom and I are relatively new to the council. We'll be embarking on engagement exercises whereby we generates knowledge, buy-in, support for the delivery of community wealth building or identification of community wealth building projects. We all know that town centers have been facing challenges. A lot of these challenges have been kind of embedded in the way we've planned, designed, and built places for the last 60 years, where we've disaggregated uses out of town centers. We've pushed everything out of town centers, made getting to them rather inhospitable if you're walking. It's, I suppose, the COVID situation has exacerbated situations in some town centers, but it's also made us reevaluate how we deal with them on a daily basis. We know that town centers are fulcrums for our communities, both from an everyday perspective, but also potentially from a tourism perspective. We know a lot of that the town centers provide these attractive environments that draw people into them. They are the hubs of our communities. They're worth investing in. They're worth reevaluating going forward. We've also known that, yeah, again, the way we've treated them has maybe not been in the best interests of how people use them sustainably. We've made them very car-centered. We know that operating costs in town centers are more expensive often than in out-of-center retail parks. And we also know that, again, through COVID, retail and hospitality leisure have been particularly hard hit. And so we need to think about the situation going forward. Also, we also know that, you know, even a month ago, we wouldn't have foreseen the situation in Ukraine, which will have further impacts on our town centers. As we know that the cost of living is going up, the energy and food costs are going up, inflation is going up, which all means disposable income is going down, which in a place like Girvan, which didn't have a lot of wiggle room there, it's going to be a particular challenge. And then there's also the future, you know, unforeseen challenges associated with climate change. So, oops. Thankfully, we do know that great places or great towns do tend to have a consistent set of ingredients that give us a good model going forward, that our town centers shouldn't just be solely reliant on retail and hospitality. They need to be diversified. You need to be looking at integrating workspaces, healthcare, education, getting more people living in them and around them, bringing civic functions back into them, activating them through events and activities, capitalizing on the rich culture and creative industries that we have, and in particular the heritage, because that's something that is again particularly local to whatever you're working, particularly local to South Ayrshire, Girvan, making the best of these assets. If you don't cherish them, they're going away, and we're not going to get them back. There's no sense reinventing them. Let's be sensible and make the best use of these things that people cherish. So as I said, our community wealth building and placemaking approach is we know that what the ingredients are, but it's about connecting and not delivering individual projects in isolation anymore, but looking at what's going on around them. With the best intentions in the world, some projects can be looked at fairly in a constrained way and not think about what is going on around them, and that maybe the conversion of a community hall, for instance, on the edge of a village, we might be looking instead at something within the town center that's more easily accessible on foot, supports that 20-minute neighborhood concept, and links to other actions or initiatives going on in that area. So it's also about thinking about what's going on in the wider area, what strategies are in place, working across disciplines. Too often in local authorities, we work in silos. We don't engage with what the folks in housing are doing, or planning, or roads, etc. So it's really kind of taking a look beyond a red line boundary of four walls and a roof kind of things at projects to see what they can add about the story of a place. And so we'll be embarking on a program to deliver place-based strategies for the 5 key towns in South Ayrshire. And the key question that we're going to ask is, or we think should be asked within any strategy or any project action initiative, is when all this is done, what kind of place will this be? We think that's quite a critical question to ask. So when we get, like I say, Tom and I are new to the council. I have to admit, I'd not been to Girvan in a number of years until I went down there late autumn. It was through an introduction by Phil Prentice at the Scottish Towns Partnership to Sarah at SENScot that we made connections with you folks. We went down there, we had a look around, we had a walk around. One of the things that jumped out, unfortunately, is the state of the high street down there, which I think was, I was not quite prepared for. I don't think I'd heard the news, but I was also somewhat heartened by the existing assets that are there, and one in particular that the community-led tourism group had been looking at, which is the townhouse, the Girvan townhouse. Which is this building, which if you can see on the map there, there's a yellow star. So it's in quite a prominent location, fronting onto the harbor. It backs onto the community garden, which if you haven't been to Girvan, I would highly recommend going there because it's absolutely brilliant. It's this hive of activity. I don't know if you're familiar with Findhorn, but it's almost like a mini Findhorn. They're kind of tucked away in the back of Girvan Town Centre. There's people are growing things, making things, they're having events and activities. They're bringing in people from, kids from the high school. They're working with, vulnerable people and disadvantaged people. It's really amazing. And here's this townhouse building that backs onto it, that sits in this strategic position, fronting onto the harbor, potentially linking the beach with the high street. And to us, this is where community wealth building and placemaking get linked. So we say we've been dealing with the community led tourism group too. We're just in the process of looking at options. The building is owned by the council. It's an attractive building. I'm not going to say it's a iconic building, but it's one of these like robust background buildings that every town needs. It currently houses kind of a disparate collection of groups and people, including a volunteer tourist information point. But we think given that the strategic location, it could be doing more. What it is, we don't know yet, but we think that there is a tremendous amount of potential in that building, in that location, to provide the fulcrum to wider regeneration works in Girvan. So again, building on the assets, working with the best of what's there, and hopefully this becomes that fulcrum where more good things radiate out from that. So we are quite excited about the potential of this building. We're looking to get a feasibility study commissioned to identify what these could be. I know that the tourism group have been considering potential accommodation uses there, which could happen on the upper floors. But hopefully the ground floor, we can look at something that works, not just, well, that could combine the best of something that a hub for the community, as well as being a draw for tourists or passing trade through the town. It's one of these things that I have to say it gets us excited about working in Girvan, because if you just read the headlines, there are some pretty grim stories coming out of there. But if you go there, you see that there's actually a lot to work with, not just in the town, but in the surrounding area. And like I say, I have to say that the tourism group seem to have a pretty good handle on that, and we're very keen to work with them both within a community wealth building perspective and a placemaking perspective going forward. And at that point, I'll bring it to a close. And I realize that Tom hasn't said anything to date, but Tom is extremely instrumental in, particularly in the townhouse. He's got a huge amount of experience working with groups, building capacity for them to deliver on these things. And Tom, maybe you can, this will be a good opportunity for you to jump in and talk about your work in Girvan and broader within the council.
Yeah, delighted to do that. Thanks for that, Mark. As Mark said, I'm Tom Henderson. I'm one of the 3 community wealth building officers. I've got some particular responsibilities in my role. I look after a couple of pillars. One of them is the land and assets pillar. I'm also on the community asset transfer board. So what that requires me to do is to look at business appraisals for CAT transfers, but also to ensure that the community wealth building principles are embedded in every application. So we've just completed one. We've just done a tennis court elsewhere in Ayrshire. So that's the first one we've done under our tenure, and I can tell you that the principles were definitely in there. So it's really good to have that sort of level of recognition. The other thing I look after is North and South Carrick. Girvan is in North Carrick, for those of you that don't know the South Ayrshire geography. And as Mark's saying, we've been spectacularly inspired by some of the elements that are there in Girvan. In other words, the bits that we've got to work with on this. As we look at the community-led transport group there, and we've been engaging them with Sarah's help, there's some really positive aspirations there. So we're trying to, as you always do with these things, you kind of follow your nose a wee bit. So there's appetite, and there's framework, there's structure, there's stuff that we can work with there to bring this through. So currently we're looking at supporting a group to become constituted, and we'll take some help for the fabulous SENScot in that. SENScot Legal always is my go-to for getting anybody constituted because of the wealth of experience there. We'll engage with the guys basically on that. We've offered to do a feasibility study, and again, that's around using the townhouse as a base, maybe some accommodation, but really to prove the concept that the townhouse can be a viable, sustainable element of the town. As Mark was alluding to, it can be a fulcrum for a real spin-off of energy for us in the town. The Girvan High Streets, a high street, doesn't look great, but it's not a lot different for a lot of the other streets we've seen in Scotland. It's just a sign of the times, I'm afraid. So, but again, we've got some things there we can work with. Some of the other things that have just come out and we're looking and working with at the moment in particular. I've taken a couple of initiatives. We were looking for initiatives, just general around the piece, but we've taken a couple of initiatives. And I've taken a couple of these, and one of the big ones that we see on the back of the Scotland Loves Local card and some recent COVID grant support that I was involved in is the lack of digital understanding everywhere around, everywhere you go. In the COVID grants for the Scottish Government, if you're involved in any of that at all, what you see is how difficulty, the skill levels, etc., levels of difficulty that people have just trying to get the application in, to the extent where I know myself and a couple of colleagues found it easier to talk some folks through the applications. And that tells you a couple of things as well, because as I started to look Girvan a wee bit more, one of the other big issues that we have is that we feel that because we're coastal and rural, a lot of traffic just passes by. And that's on the way to Stranraer and the ferries. And when people come back, they just do exactly the same again, or they head down to Dumfries and Galway. So it started to occur to me that we really need to highlight where the folks are. So I've just done a wee proposal in the last couple of days, and myself and Mark are talking about this at the moment. And for the whole of South Ayrshire, we're calling it 5 Towns Digital. We're calling it 5 Towns Digital. I'm thinking of piloting Girvan on this, and that would be to go through all the businesses, organisations, social enterprise, community groups, and get them digital savvy. And that could be Google My Business. There are some tools that you can use. I've done some of this work before, and it's very, very relevant to identifying your digital footprint to the rest of the world, so people don't drive past. Even people in the town know where you are, etc., etc. And it continues to hit us between the eyes everywhere we go. And in fact, a couple of colleagues were doing some support on Scotland Love Local piece last week, and found that a couple of restaurants in Girvan had no Wi-Fi. Now, I do a wee bit of travelling around Scotland. If I'm in Outer Hebrides and there's no Wi-Fi, you feel quite bad. So if there are shops and cafes in Girvan without it, feels like we need to do something about that. So that's one of our initiatives. And again, for increasing the footfall, another one which might seem slightly unconnected, but the more we think about it and the more I think about it, it really just has to be. There are also some rural community transport issues. So we've been engaging in those areas as well. So had another eureka moment about strategically positioning some electric vehicle charging points, because some of the buses that are being used are now more recently becoming electric, but also folks are buying electric cars, and we need to have the facility and ability to be able to take that in hand and make the best of it. And again, increasing the footfall, trying to stop people driving past South Ayrshire, come into the towns and villages. We've got 5 towns, 24 villages. It would seem sensible to try and connect all of these dots up. So that's the type of work that we're doing out there. Just to reiterate again what Mark was saying about the community garden, if you get a chance, go and do it. It ticks absolutely every box that we would want ticked, and that anybody would want ticked. It's a spectacular place to be, but we're going to use that as a place that we can invite people, show people, tour people, and really showcase it on our citation. I hope that gives you a good wee round tour of Girvan, and any other South Ayrshire questions, I'm delighted to take them.
Thanks so much, Tom and Mark. That was really, really interesting for me. Just a new strategic approach to community wealth building and some detail on the things that you're working on. So thanks very much indeed. I would also like to thank you for connecting with SENScot and ourselves around the community-led tourism pilot in Girvan, because that was really important to them. It was also important to us in terms of how they progress with your support, hopefully, because they have made good progress, and I hope that factors into your plans. So thank you for making those connections and being so helpful. I'm just going to open the floor now and see if we have, Mark, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just very quickly to say that Tom and I have both been immensely impressed with the community-led tourism group in Girvan. We had a session with them one evening last week. We'd been working with Zan and Chris, and found it quite refreshing, kind of Zan's youthful energy, and the fact that you know, a lot of times when you deal with community groups, they tend to be similar demographics, I suppose. And so dealing with the likes of Zan has been impressive, and we want to be able to support her and them going forward, because they're an asset to Girvan as we see it.
Excellent. Thanks, Mark. Really appreciate your feedback on that. Has anybody got questions for Mark or Tom? Claire?
Hello, hi there. Hi, I'm Claire. I'm co-founder of the Cateran Eco Museum up in Eastern Perthshire and Western Angus. We're a museum in the landscape, covering about 1,000 square kilometres, and all our sites are outside, and we are a community-led tourism destination. And my question really is, the current community-led group that you have got in Girvan, is it all voluntary? Do you expect that to continue to be voluntary? Because one of the issues that we have across the board in our communities is that there's now way too much expectation on everything being done for free by the community.
Yeah, great question, Claire. And it's one of the reasons that we wanted to do this work was to get investment not into SENScot but actually into the local areas, so that they had a resource available to make this work. But Sarah, you might want to follow up on the specifics of that question.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously this is, they're part of the pilot project, so we were able to put resource into both areas. What became very clear straight away was the need for somebody to be able to take on the work. So there is a volunteer steering group who have done an awful lot of work, but they really needed someone to do the legwork. And so they've been able to work with Girvan Town Team, who have provided some resource through Zan, which is fantastic. One of the things, well, the most important thing about this whole project for us is telling the story about the projects and their needs, and really taking those lessons out, because we have to share those with government, with our national agencies, so they understand what the resources are that a community requires in order to take control, I guess, or develop a voice. And I think that this is an area that has come out really, really strong, top, I would say, and definitely a lesson that we want to share. And I guess that this project has just given us evidence around that. So yeah, we completely agree. You can't expect volunteers to do absolutely everything. There has to be something. But
that also kind of feeds back into your point about Mark, about the same kinds of demographics, because you're constantly relying on people who don't have to earn a living to be able to offer voluntary time, and they do tend to come from a particular demographic, and that's kind of just not okay anymore in our wider community, and particularly in Alyth, where actually now starting to say no to partnerships and collaborations that come with that expectation that we will do everything for free, and we're being very explicit about why we're saying no.
That's a very fair point, Claire, and I think both pilots have a range of people and demographics that I think has been really important, and it hasn't been easy. You have to bring people with you authentically, and they need to be motivated, but your point is well made about managing expectation in terms of how things can, the speed at which things can progress and be sustained. So one of the lessons learned, as Sarah said, for us, going back to the government division that funded this project, is to make sure that they hear some of the lessons and challenges around this going forward. Any other questions? I think I can see everyone. Okay, well, I have a question for Mark and Tom, if that's okay, if the chair's allowed to ask you. So you're taking a strategic approach, I understand that. You talked a lot about aligning it, your charter, for example, and making sure that the community wealth building progress in South Ayrshire is not siloed. How have you done that in terms of bringing in housing, transport, assets? How have you managed to do that, and is it working well?
Okay, that's a good question. We wanted to make community wealth building, we want to embed it so it's lasting. So we've been doing a socialization program, if you will, whereby per each of the pillars, each of the 5 community wealth building pillars, we've been holding work stream events to which we've invited guest speakers. The guest speakers have been a range of folks, both outside the council from various organizations or local authorities or government, to in-house. So we get this combination of, we get dialogue going about how we can do things. We invite relevant service leads to these sessions, and we're seeking to build, it's not just a kind of one and done. There's a series of events, and we're looking to establish a champions network. So whereby through these events, we're educating people about what community wealth building is, and then they can take it back to their teams, and through refreshed service plans or policies, we'll be embedding community wealth building going forward. So we're just about to, we're on our 5th event coming up in April, at which we've got Matthew Brown, who's the leader of Preston City Council, speaking, and Neil McEnroy from the Democracy Collective and Scottish Government will be speaking at that as well. We've got somebody from Sydney in Australia who's going to do a short video on their approach to us. So we realize that community wealth building it's a global movement, but it's being done locally. But we also think there's benefits in learning from what others are doing and getting challenged.
Yeah, no, that good answer. Is there any other questions from the people in the room? Can't see any hands up.
Oh, sorry, Pauline. I was just going to say, I guess from my point of view, on Friday we're having that final session with Mark Crothall from the Scottish Tourism Alliance, and I would really love to be able to feed back some key points. So if people have thoughts around any of the key points that are coming out of this, that they think that, we're looking for solution focused ideas here, what can we ask of the national agencies? So I would be interested to know people's thoughts on that, so that we're taking the right information forward.
Claire?
Well, I think I'm actually doing the Tourism Destination Leaders course at the moment, which is proving to be very eye-opening for possibly some of the wrong reasons. But I think one of the things that the current infrastructure for supporting tourism in Scotland could do is actually really look at its funding streams and start to repurpose some of those funding streams towards investing in communities to engage in community-led tourism. And that shouldn't be a top-down approach. It should be kind of almost a participatory budgeting approach where communities decide how that money is going to be spent, not the powers that be who sit in Visit Scotland or anywhere else.
Yes, we'll agree with you 100% on that, Claire. Thank you. Neil McKinnon?
Yeah, thanks. I'm up in Lewis at the moment, so it's all very helpful hearing all this. I was just wondering thoughts that Mark, Tom might have had on evaluation and sort of measurement over the years ahead. How do we know this is going to be succeeding?
How do we know it's going in the right direction, Mark and Tom?
Do you want me to jump in there, Mark?
Sorry, Tom, you want to take that one?
Yeah. We're looking at several ways, Neil. If I can go back just ever so slightly, we've kind of rolled this back a wee bit because we see the value of the socialisation. A lot of people like myself who have been on the other side of the fence, I've got the scars with some of this stuff, right? So trying to navigate through, the local authorities can be quite difficult at times. So we've taken a baby steps approach to socialising this all the way through. And as Mark was saying, just to dig a bit deeper, every service lead has come to every pillar awareness raising session, if you like. We'll then drop down to a champions network, so we will know a champion for each one of these as well, so we can refer all over the place. One of the good things about community wealth building is it really breaks down the silos, because it has to, just because the sheer nature of the way it operates. So we also have some targets that this is part, or our initiative is part of the Ayrshire growth deal. So there are targets, there are hardline targets for us to follow. So about business engagement, all around a whole host of things about procurement spend up. We've got aspirations. So just to put it out there, because I know everybody will be interested in it. We before we had a procurement one, and it's the only one that's left. We've done 4, but there's an interesting ambition. What we're calling them ambitions, Mark. That's how we position this. We've got a very supportive head of economic development, and our procurement situation at the moment, which is the best in Ayrshire, is something like 26% of local spend. Now, if you think about that as a number, it sounds low. Our head of economic development said, that's a bit low, we should have a big ambition. So the ambition he's given us is to add an additional 10%. The procurement guidance wanted to add 2, but our target's 10. So if we look at all of the pillars all the way through, we've got these measures similar to that to align ourselves to. And that's our kind of starting position. We have a budget as well to get us to that position. But that's our endeavour, is to get to all of those lines. And we've, as a team, signed up to all of these and plan to deliver that over the 3-year piece of the work. Does that make sense, Neil?
Did that answer your question, Neil?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, okay.
Sarah?
Yeah, no, a great question as well. I'm chairing this, but I'm very interested. Victoria.
Hello, thank you. Very interesting. Just picking up on the point about evaluation and measurements. I mean, the town growth deal as a fund wasn't set up in a community wealth building context. So the measures don't measure community wealth building as such. Now, I fully recognise when you got the money, you've got to kind of meet the funder's wishes. So you've got to tick that box as well. I'm not saying they're useless, but are there other measures that you have put in place locally that will tell you that community wealth building is happening, taking the point that this is a long-term process?
Yep.
That's probably where Mark's key expertise is. I think, Mark, for the places, that's, for me, that's one of the most interesting things about this. Let you hand over, Mark.
Yeah, Victoria, I share your frustration or perspective on these KPIs, if you will, and having it be a box-ticking exercise where success becomes engaging with 100 businesses, whatever that means. And so that's why we're trying to be, I think the way other local authorities are administering the fund that comes with community wealth building is through business advisors. And so they're handing out kind of small scale grants to these, you know, I'm not going to say it's on an ad hoc basis because I don't know the way they operate, but there's maybe the perception that it's done on an ad hoc basis whereby, you know, we're trying to take this place-based approach where we're looking at initiatives like the townhouse, where we know that it will make a meaningful difference. How that's measured in 5 or 10 years time, I'm not, you know, whether it's you know, the number of events that they're putting on, the number of people through the door, it probably depends on what the final use is in that building. But I think we would be looking at metrics in terms of number, how many people are living within a 5 or 10 minute walk of the town center. We'd be looking at life, what's the life expectancy, what are the vacancy rates in the town center now, these kinds of things, where it stretches maybe beyond that individual grant to a business that I think it'd be too easy to be drawn into through the KPIs within the growth deal business case.
Yeah. Did that answer your question, Victoria? It was a great question again. Thank you.
It was a good question, and I wish I could say I had the final answer on that, Victoria. But we're relatively new at the council, and I'd be keen to maybe keep in touch. And if you have ideas on how we should be measuring it, then
yeah. Not easy, but it was a great question. Thanks, Victoria. Anybody else got a follow-up question for them? Well, I was going to ask, since you mentioned procurement in a council context and that percentage, which is actually quite high for local spend. So clearly that will be a measure of spend going to local businesses, spend going to local community enterprises, etc. My question would be, if I'm being ambitious, I would want to see all the anchor organisations, NHS, your FEHE partners, etc. I would want to see explicit in their procurement forward plans, community wealth building rippled throughout that, and maybe some targets around a trajectory on their spend that goes locally and it starts to go like that. Now, again, that won't happen overnight, but if they're serious about ending their spend in a community wealth building context for the people and the businesses who operate in their area, then you would want to see a clear line of sight to community wealth building within the procurement strategies. I just wonder if that's something that you've spoken to the anchor organisations about.
That comes from the Commission, CWB Commission, Pauline. So we, what we're talking about there is the South Ayrshire Local Authority spend, and I mean the guys are quite proud of that number. However, the ambition is to get that up, and that's the thing, because we see the value in doing that. From the Commission, down from the Commission, there's work streams are taking place for each and every one of the pillars as well. So, for example, because I head up the land and assets one, I've just recently done one of their work streams, and all the anchors are on there. So the procurement one will be the same. So the NHS, the police and fire, etc., they're all there. So it's quite interesting. There's a whole kind of encapsulation of that, and I'm sure we'll be shouting about what we're doing, but there are some serious connections through the Community Wealth Building Commission to pull all of that together.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, is there no other questions? Are we ready for lunch, do you think? Okay, well, I would like to ask you to thank our speakers, Mark and Tom, for sharing your experience and the journey that you're on. You know, we know the scale of the task here, but it has to involve, let's not lose sight of communities and community wealth building. And that's you know, that's what we're here for. We want to make sure that the people and organisations that can bring real added value to community wealth building play their part in this and get real opportunities. So thank you to our speakers, and thank you to each one of you for coming. And I think we're in day 3 of our week, so we'll finish off on Friday, but we'll take lots of the things, comments, observations from all the sessions and compile them on our kind of final session on Friday. So thank you very much and have a good afternoon.